welcome to the show. This is Everything Under the Sun. My name is Ty. Hope all of you are doing well. It is a beautiful day out, and I am podcasting from the beach. Well, in my car at the beach, because, I think it'd be a little loud for the waves, but you may hear the waves in the background. That staticky sound, that's not really probably coming through well as waves, but that's what that sound is. It's the sound of waves, because I decided to do a little carpe diem, seize the day, and it's a beautiful day outside. I think last week I spoke about winter coming, and I think I was just being a little overzealous, because this next week I looked at the forecast. It's going to be pretty warm, so it looks like summer is still kind of slowly waning out, but fall's here. I mean, I can tell by the change in the feel in the air. You know that feeling when like the season changes and you just kind of you feel it. It's just like something about the environment just changes, and that's kind of what I'm kind of feeling. I'm feeling like there's been a shift for sure. So we're just going to get some warm weather. I'm going to enjoy it while it lasts, but decided to go to the beach. And of course, I felt like podcasting, so I brought my podcast stuff with me. And as you can tell, I'm going to try to make this quick because it's really hot. I'm sitting in the sun in my car. I mean, like half the windows are rolled down, but not all of them, because, there's a parking lot kind of thing on the other side. Unfortunately, I found a parking space at the end, so no one can park on the other side of me, so those windows are down. But I decided to wear I decided to wear black jeans to the beach for some reason, and it's just bad decisions, but it's really hot, so I'm going to make this quick. As you can tell, the episode is a follow-up episode on influence, and the reason I did this episode, or wanted to do a follow-up on influence, was because I got an email recently from this newsletter that I follow. It's called Podcast Movement, and any podcasters out there, there's Podcast Movement is essentially this program. I'm not getting paid by them or anything like that, but it's this group or something. Obviously I'm not getting paid by them because I can't speak about them very well, but they basically just send you different things about new podcasting techniques or podcasts that are coming out, or just different tips, different seminars and things that are going on, or just different news podcast related. So they sent me this email, and it was basically multiple kind of things within it, but there was an opinion piece that was in there that caught my attention, because it was kind of exactly what I was speaking about in the episode about influence, where I kind of just mentioned it at the end, and it was like more or less the influence that we have over other people. And I think that's something that's so big to recognize, because there are so many ways that influence starts to impact other people's lives, that we kind of have to be cautious of what we're saying and what we're doing, and how we're influencing people. But we can't really do that until we recognize the level of influence that we have over however many people. So this article, this opinion piece that was written, it was basically speaking about the Joe Rogan Experience podcast. And many people may know of Joe Rogan because of his just random philanthropic adventures, Fear Factor. He's been a stand-up comedian. I think he's been like invested in, just like his hands are in so many different domains. I think he did like a UFC cage fighting for a little bit, or maybe that's just a passion of his, but I could be just fabricating all that information. But Joe Rogan, many people know of him. Maybe you listen to his podcast. But this article is basically, this opinion piece is basically speaking about this podcast. And the name for the actual opinion piece, the title for the actual opinion piece, is called "The Danger of Joe Rogan's Mammoth Footprint." And I mean, that's just obviously like, you leave a footprint, you leave an impression in some kind of way or form. So this is essentially saying that he has a vast influence in who he's impacting through his podcast. And I mean, like he does have a lot of viewers and downloads like of his podcast, so it makes sense. But in the email that I got, the opinion, it says opinion, the responsibility in Joe Rogan's enormous reach. So essentially it's basically saying the same thing, or summarizing the same idea, is that there is a huge influence that Joe Rogan has because of his podcast. And many of you may listen to this, so I'm kind of just curious about your thoughts on this idea as well, as I kind of speak about it, and just what that, I guess, just like what that means, because for me, I think it speaks exactly to what I was referencing in the last episode about influence, when I was just again saying that like that we have to recognize the influence that we have, and what to do about that when we do recognize that influence. What do we want to do? What kind of footprint do we want to leave in someone else's life or in someone else's mind? So that's something that's definitely that definitely needs to be considered as we kind of think about this topic. So I'm just going to read this word for word, because this is a short synopsis of what the article is speaking about, the thing that I got in the email. And this is it's not very long, so Okay, so here it is. Joe Rogan's gigantic cultural footprint necessitates better fact-checking, writes Armand Badre of Princeton University. That's the person who wrote the article, this opinion piece. What happens when entertainment becomes an information source? Precisely because his fans believe almost every word he says, his ability to unintentionally deceive a massive audience is huge. With an average of 190 million monthly downloads, the Joe Rogan Experience reaches more people than any single news channel. As he continues to interview politically adjacent guests, not to mention conspiracy theorists like Alex Jones, the impact of Rogan's lax approach grows along with his fan base. It's not that the free-willing demigod doesn't try. He generally does hold himself to a high standard, as he describes himself as his own harshest critic, Badger points out. Rogan should not be faulted for becoming one of the top podcasters in the country, but with great power comes great responsibility. Now, there are a few things with that article that kind of caught my attention as, well, this is what I read in the email. So, like, that's what I just read is what I read in the email. So, I obviously read the full article, and you can read that as well. I can link that at some point on the Instagram page if you're interested in reading that. But it's an interesting read. I mean, it does get you to think about just the influence that, obviously people that we all know as, like, that are in the limelight in different domains, obviously they have influence, so to kind of put a critical eye on the influence that they do have. But also I think that this can be scaled down to just the influence that we have over people and may not even know that we have influence over people. So that's one of the big things that caught my attention within this reading, was the unintentionally deceive the masses. And that's something that, I mean, to deceive someone, that means that you have some kind of influence over their opinion or thought over something, like, because, in order to deceive them, they have to have your trust. And to have your trust, that means that you have some kind of influence over them. So unintentionally influence, even, because you don't mean to deceive people. So there was information that, Joe Rogan will say on his podcast, but then, like, if it's something wrong or he gets information that says the otherwise, then he will publicly, say that he made a mistake or kind of redact that information. But, all the other words that are said, all the other information or opinions that are said are just going to be believed by other people. And I'm not saying that's, like, right or wrong. I'm just saying that it's nice that maybe we can start taking a critical eye over this. And something else that this article spoke about was his lax approach. And the article kind of goes a little bit more into detail about that. Just more or less just his way of just communicating is more of just, like, that he's a person with, ideas and opinions just like everyone else is. And how, like, he just wants to do a podcast that's going more in line with that, kind of speaking his mind as a person that's just thinking. And that's amazing. It's amazing when we can bring our full selves and true selves to a situation. But this article is basically speaking about how he does have a large following and how people are going to believe the words that he says. So should this be in a little more of a critical eye, where it's like news sources like NPR have a lot more weight behind, truth and fact checking and things like that. So, I mean, like, whatever news source that you decide to view and, take information from, news sources generally have a lot more fact checking that's involved because people go to it for news. But when it's an entertainment thing, like a podcast, it's less, or a podcast that's based off of entertainment, and that's kind of how he started this podcast. It's just something that was more of an entertainment piece. So as he gained more following and more people started being impacted by the words that he says, it means that there's a lot more weight behind the words that are being said. And I think that as we think about this idea of just having influence and having weight behind the words that we say, should we be more careful when we understand that we have that power? And that's essentially what this article is speaking about. And the two ideas kind of just made me think about it to scale, because I think all things can be kind of scaled in a corresponding way, as, we can look at a larger situation and kind of bring it back down to a more simple situation or a more common situation that many of us may deal with, which is, just influence over the people in our lives, maybe friends, maybe family, maybe just employees. Maybe you have a supervisor position or a manager position, or maybe you're just, someone that people turn to in your job environment or whatever environment it is. That's influence. So when we understand who we have that influence over and how much influence we have, I think that's kind of when we can be a little more critical of what we're saying and what we're doing that's influencing these people. Because something about influence, it doesn't just stay in that moment of you influencing that person. That person is going to think something different, and that thought is going to lead to a different thought, and that thought's going to lead to a different thought, and that thought's going to lead to an action, and it's going to just perpetuate itself into something that's so much bigger than itself. So when we have influence over people, it's not just speaking about some kind of immediate situation. It's something that's going to impact this person's life because it's influencing them in that way. And all things are connected. It's like the butterfly effect. The flap of a butterfly wing is going to cause like an avalanche, somewhere on the other side of the world. It's just everything is connected in that way. So as we think about the ways that we're influencing people, what information and what things are we doing that's going to impact them, and what lasting effect is that going to cause? And this article is not saying that Joe Rogan's like saying negative information that's going to cause mass dismay or something like that, but with so many people being influenced with the wrong words, maybe something could happen, some kind of shift could happen. There was something that the article mentioned about on like September 17th, how he spoke about radical leftists causing the fires in Portland, and that information being debunked. And of course he kind of went on social media and on his podcast and spoke about how he was wrong about that information, and how like that wasn't something that was true. And of course that's like the right thing to do, but so many people can hold on to that word. So it's just the influence that we have. And the basic thing that I wanted to get at when I read this is that of course we can't blame ourselves for the influence that we have over people, and sometimes we don't know the influence that we have over people. But as we think about different situations, you can kind of decipher, maybe I do have influence in this situation, maybe I do have influence over these people, or whatever it is. So recognize that influence and recognize how you're influencing people, because it's going to happen in some way, whether you're going to be influenced by others or you're going to influence other people. It's going to happen. So how is it going to happen? What's that going to look like, and what kind of lasting impression do you want to leave in someone else's life, or have them embark on? Because that's really what it comes down to. And that's what struck me about this article, because it's on a massive scale. It's something that we can look at and say, yeah, I think that he should have a little more of a critical view on the things that he says, because he has that impact over so many people. There's a wide array of things that can happen when people have so much influence. So we can look at it from the larger scale and say, yes, it's important to kind of be a little more critical when you have that much influence. But I think as we think about it a little bit more, we can bring that to like our day-to-day situation. And when we realize the influence that we have over other people, we can also say, maybe we should also put a critical eye over how we're influencing these other people, and the impression that we're going to leave in this person's life. And I think that's kind of why it's good to be just good to people, because as you bring that goodness to other people, that's influence. The way that we approach people, the way that we connect with people, the way that we interact with people, that is all influence. It influences us in different ways. Have you heard about that, like different stories or scenarios where it's like, the kid that's, walking home, he gets bullied a lot from school, and, he's walking home and he's planning on, maybe taking his life, and he runs into somebody, they help him out, pick up his books and things like that, and they say, hey, come over, hang out, all this different stuff. I'm explaining this really bad, but you get the idea. There's a lot of situations where, the small influences that we have over other people and other situations can be so meaningful and so impactful. So just be good to other people, share that time, share that experience, because a lot of times we deal with very difficult things. Sometimes we deal with things that are challenging for us. And I think that gives us compassion in other situations as we interact with other people, as we move with other people. And I'm sorry, I'm getting very distracted because there are people playing sand soccer, and that reminds me of being back in Virginia, where there were different sand soccer contests in the beginning of summer, and yeah, just a lot of good vibes at the beach. But anyway, I said I was gonna make this short because I'm hot, I'm sweating. This entire time I've been rubbing sweat off my head because it's just been beating down. So I'm gonna close this out because I'm gonna actually get out of the car and walk on the beach and get some of that good ocean water. But anyway, the point is, influence is always happening. We have influence just like, Joe Rogan has influence. Maybe it's on a different scale, but we also all have to take that critical eye as we think about the influence that we have. Just because you don't have as much influence as Joe Rogan doesn't mean that you shouldn't think critically about the influence that you do have over the people that you do have that over. So influence people in the best way possible, influence people to grow, influence people to, love themselves more and love, you know, each other more, because I think that that's kind of just something that's going to resonate right back to you. So, that's basically all I got for this follow-up. I love you all. If you have any ideas or thoughts or comments or, your thoughts on this article about Joe Rogan, do you believe that he should have a more critical eye? And I think the article does bring up something interesting, and that's just the fact that it's not his fault that he has such a mass following, and it's not his fault that people listen to his word. But, that just being a fact that people do, is that something that, he should change up his podcast about, or change up the way that he brings things to the table because of this influence? I can honestly see it going either way, like a valid argument going on either opinion. And this is just kind of like as this pops up in my head. But, what are your thoughts on it? Like, share that if you want to, everything.sunpodcast@gmail.com, or any topics or anything like that. The next week will be the topic of choices/decisions, which I think will be an amazing topic. But yeah, again, send those topics in, send any thoughts or ideas or comments or anything about this article, everything.sunpodcast@gmail.com, or you can join the Instagram page at everything.sunpodcast, or the Twitter page at everysunpodcast. And you can join the Facebook group too, if you want to, at Everything Under the Sun with Ty on Facebook, like I said. Anyway, love you all, and I will see you next time.